As a two-term governor in the state of Iowa, he could look out across the many fields and see miles and miles of corn, soybeans, and many other crops. And he recognized the power of the bioeconomy for rural Americans. But in 2009, President Obama swore Secretary Vilsack in as the 30th U.S. Agriculture Secretary of this country. And when he did, the Secretary moved upstairs to an office where when he looks outside, he probably sees miles and miles of cars, not corn, and lots of traffic. But he has continued to champion the bioeconomy because Secretary Vilsack has recognized that the bio-based economy is not just important to rural Americans in Iowa or South Dakota, but it's important to all of us. And he's also championed the role of the federal government in helping to lead us. So USDA also has many responsibilities which he could address today, ranging from foreign agriculture trade development to food safety to school feeding programs. But we're deeply appreciative of Secretary Vilsack for his leadership and all of the USDA BioPreferred team for their hard work throughout the year, and importantly, their partnership in executing this event today. And thank you, Secretary, for coming to speak.
Well, thank you very, very much. The way this works, my staff gives me a briefing, which I read the night before, and I make notes on a card, and I come and I show up. But today, as I was walking through the various displays, meeting the entrepreneurs and people who are extraordinarily proud of producing bio-based products, it occurred to me that I probably need to go a little deeper than the briefing suggested. So with your permission, Louis, by the way, I'm really surprised you had to edit the pheasants out of that field because you've stolen all of the pheasants from Iowa. So bring them back, would you please? About 30 years ago, I was a small-town lawyer practicing law with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law in a town of 8,000 people in southeast Iowa. We were in the throes of a very difficult farm economy. Farmers had overextended themselves at a time when credit was available. They expanded their operations, land prices inflated, and all of a sudden we were faced with declining prices and declining values. And many farmers were faced with having to cease operations. Some of them came to my office for purposes of me representing them as they were being foreclosed on. And during the course of that work, I became acutely aware of who these people were. And they were very representative and continue to be representative of the people who were displayed in that video today. Hardworking, caring, concerned, patriotic Americans whose experience and whose existence is defined by the land that they owned and operated. They were extremely proud of being a farmer. And their goal in life was to continue to be a farmer and to give the next generation and future generations of their family the same opportunities that they had had preceding generations. It occurred to me as I represented those folks that we needed to do more for them. We needed to find more creative ways to create market opportunities beyond just simply having those farmers sell their grain at an elevator and get whatever the price was on that particular day. That we needed to create competition for the soybeans, the corn, and other products. About that time, I got involved in public life, and eventually I had the chance to run for governor of the state of Iowa. And during the course of my campaign, I would talk to the Iowans about making Iowa the food capital of the world. And I had a series of consultants. These are people that you pay a lot of money to help you message so that you can convince voters to vote for you. My consultants were not enamored with the notion of food capital. They didn't understand it. They, like me, had come from a city background and didn't quite understand what that all meant. I tried to explain to them that what it meant was basically taking this plant-based material and these crops and converting it into anything and everything so that we would create the kind of competition for product that would stabilize prices and that we'd create jobs processing the plant-based material into all these products, and those facilities would be located in rural communities. It made sense to me, Lewis. It made sense to me. It didn't make sense to my consultants. In fact, they were so upset about this that they actually went out and they, behind my back, asked our pollster to poll whether Iowans understood food capital. It came back that there were 7% of highly intelligent Iowans who understood what I was talking about. And so they tried to convince me that if I was speaking to 100% of Iowans, 93% did not understand what I was talking about, and I should stop talking about that, and I should continue to talk about things like education and health care and property taxes. I didn't stop talking about food capital. And I think one of the reasons I was successful, one of many reasons, a lot of hard work and folks helped me, was that people understood that behind that notion, they didn't quite grasp it, but behind that notion was a vision of a more positive, more proactive future for rural America. Now, over the course of 8 years as governor, we tried to implement that, we tried to push it, we tried to invest in it, and we saw an expansion of bio-based product manufacturing, primarily fuels, in the state. And I left the governor's office feeling that we had started this conversation and that people had a general sense. Ironically, in 2008, following the election, I got a call from the consultant who was then consulting the president-elect, knowing that I was going up to Chicago to be interviewed for this job. He advised me that now I could talk about food capital, that it would be appropriate for me to talk about it in the context of my interview. So I did. And it must have been fairly persuasive because the president-elect, President Obama, after about 10 minutes of my enthusiastic outline of what we could do, offered me this job. And over the course of the last 7.5 years, we have worked with the soybean board, we've worked with the corn growers, we've worked with folks who had the same vision. And I will tell you, we've made a full commitment here at USDA. And it has been across the board. We've had just incredible help from virtually every mission area. Our research, education extension folks decided to create a series of biomass centers where we're currently doing research, and nearly $300 million has been invested in helping to create the science behind a lot of the products that we saw here today. That work, I believe, will no doubt continue. We looked for ways for producers to be given an opportunity to look at a variety of crops that they could use through the BCAP program. Now almost 900 producers, primarily in the Midwest, benefiting from the BCAP program. It involves about 50,000 acres of land. We worked with advanced manufacturers, bioproduct manufacturers, to provide assistance. Over 350 companies now receiving help and assistance from USDA, several $100 million invested in their efforts. We looked for unique partnerships. We started the Farm to Fly partnership because we recognized that there would be a need for commercial aviation, a need for a jet fuel that would allow them to meet the emission standards that were being set internationally. And we also recognize that it's a lot easier to sell to airports, because there are only about 40 airports that sell 90% of the jet fuel, than it is to try to continue to disperse biofuels through a variety of gas stations around the United States, especially with the oil industry not being fully supportive of this. And I'm proud to say that this year at LAX in Los Angeles, there'll be over 12,000 flights from that airport that will be fueled with biofuel, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Alaska Airlines now committing by the year 2020 to be 100% biofuel-based for their operations and aviation operations. Was in a GE plant where they are retrofitting the jet engine so that it would be more conducive to the use of biofuel. So tremendous opportunity. Unique and interesting partnership with commercial aviation, Boeing, GE. Department of Defense. great partner, especially the Navy. Ray Mabus, a visionary. I picked up the paper yesterday here in the Washington Post, and I was so pleased to see on the editorial page an editorial written by David Ignatius, who's a very smart, insightful journalist, who was talking about the Great Green Fleet, Ray Mabus's commitment to a biofuel future for the Navy, recognizing that the security of our sailors and our Marine Corps folks dependent on our ability to access fuels that were domestically produced and not necessarily reliant on fuels produced in the Middle East or dependent on transport through the Middle East. And so very proud to have been in the middle of the Pacific Ocean not too long ago on the USS Livingston, watching that ship being refueled with a bio-based biofuel. Purchased 77 million gallons of that fuel, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Another unique partnership with the Department of Energy and the Navy and us to help to create a drop-in aviation fuel. And then really focusing on making sure that consumers in America would be fully aware of the variety of bio-based products. I think it's an untold story. And this video is a good example of spreading the word in these displays here. I didn't realize how many thousands of products there are that are bio-based. And now 2,700 products at USDA have been given the ability to be certified as bio-based, to be able to put that label. That label says more than this product is bio-based. That label says this product is an American-made product. That label says this product is helping to stabilize prices and to improve income opportunities and diversify income opportunities for farm families. That label says this is about jobs in rural America. And that label is also about reducing our reliance on foreign oil. It's also a label that says we are a sustainable product, that we are committed to improving the environment and to allowing us to deal with the challenges that weather and climate will present. It's an extraordinarily important label, and I'm pleased to see that we've expanded the number of products. We've also encouraged our federal family to understand the power that we have as federal agencies in procuring these products. What started as a handful of products, now 97 or 98 categories of products, over 15,000 products in the catalog for departments, federal departments, to know where they can do good for rural America, where they can do good for farmers by purchasing bio-based products. And we are now in the process of developing and working with our federal sister agencies to sort of hold us all accountable, to basically have a better understanding of how many of these products we're selling and purchasing. So it has been a holistic effort, but we wouldn't be able to do it without the great farmers in this country and without the promotion activities and marketing activities that we see here today. It's a great partnership. It's a great combination. And it speaks, I think, a more optimistic and a more progressive view of America's future. This is just, as you all know, just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the beginning of a great story. You all are helping to transition an entire economy and providing leadership not just in the U.S. but also internationally. One of the reasons why we were able to secure an agreement, a historic agreement, on climate change was because agriculture stepped up, identified ways in which we could reduce emissions, and part of the strategy behind that is renewable products, sustainably produced products. So this is incredibly important. But let me finish where I began. You see, I think it's incredibly important for America to continue to invest in rural places. And I've been asking folks like me who grew up or who are currently living in cities to stop for just a second during the day and reflect on what rural America does for them. hardly any of us sit down to a meal that hasn't been impacted and affected by rural people. The food that we eat, produced. A nation that is food secure, meaning that we don't have to rely on any other country to feed our people. Please understand how unique that is in the world. Hardly any major country in the world today can say that, which means that we're far more secure. We're not reliant to be able to feed our people. The water we drink, impacted and affected predominantly by what happens in rural America, especially if you live out in the West. An amazing reality that all of the electricity, all of the power that we consume during the day to put on our computers and to light our offices and our homes and to heat them and cool them, the feedstock, the genesis of that power, predominantly from rural America. We've had an opportunity to meet several of our brave veterans, and we thank them for their service. What's little known by most people in America is that a disproportionate number of those veterans who serve in the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps and Navy and Coast Guard, those folks come disproportionately from rural areas. It's 15% of America's population, but nearly somewhere between 35 to 40% of our military. So this is an important place. And it's an important place that has an important value. You know, people ask me, well, why is it that we see a lot of young people going into the service from small towns and rural areas? People assume it's because it's an opportunity that doesn't necessarily exist in that small town. I think it's much more significant than that. I think that when you grow up around folks like Lewis and his family, he understands something very basic, which is that he can't keep taking from his land. You have to give something back to it, don't you? I mean, you have to replenish it. You have to renourish it. You have to give something back because it's something that's providing value to you. These kids who grow up around Lewis's farm and Lewis's small town, they kind of get that. They kind of get the notion that if there's something that's really valuable that's giving me something, I've got a responsibility to give something back to it. And when you think about what this great country does for us, how extraordinary it is to be and how fortunate we are to live here with the freedoms and the liberties and the opportunities to dream and the opportunities to achieve and people that work together and care about each other, you think, well, you know, that's a pretty special place. I have some responsibility to give back to it. That's a value system that is alive and well in rural areas, but is dependent on having an economy that creates opportunities for future generations to learn and relearn that lesson, to make sure those values are handed down to the next generation. We can't assume that those values will be handed down absent an economy. That's why this is important. That's why I'm here today, to thank you for what you're doing, because you are creating this incredible opportunity to transform our economy, to bring economic activity back to rural communities, to bring manufacturing back, processing back, to stabilize prices, and to make sure that that value system remains alive and well for future generations. So welcome to USDA. I hope that you have a great day. I appreciate the information. I can guarantee you that I'll have this on my desk along with the block of wood that I have from our new cross-laminated timber initiative, which we think is going to bring a whole new industry to the United States. This is an exciting future, and you are part of it, and you have helped to start it, and God bless you for it. Thank you very much.